All right, let's see if it works tonight.
And the target audience, man, what's the is the
The target audience. All right, so here we are. So the target audience, it's really whoever's listening. So I have a demographic of both veterans and military, and then sometimes I do have people come on that are applicants. But the majority of my listenership is going to be that recruiter, who's out there on the bag right now. So that's yeah. So hey guys, we are live right now. So you guys came in literally as we were still talking because I was trying to figure it all out. But hey, welcome everybody to December. Sometimes again. I know this week has been crazy. I've been dropping a whole lot of episodes, and I'll be completely real, guys. The reason why is because um, I've been back on recruiting duty for about 9 months now, and I'm still trying to figure out that battle rhythm. And to be a father, have 3 kids, be a husband, be on active duty, and run a podcast is a lot. So I did realize though that I was going through videos the other day and I just posted it. For those of you who do know, First Form, the guy who runs it is Andy Frisella. So Andy Frisella, who also created 75 Hard, he sent me a video about a year ago, talking about my podcast that he heard of me and stuff like that, and just talking about the longevity of the podcast and how he didn't get noticed until after 300 episodes, and how at that point there was a lot of times and different things. So I shared that with you guys today, and the reason why I did that is just because last night I was talking with Austin, and one of the conversations that came up was just continue to push and continue to do what you guys believe in and have a purpose. And when you have that purpose, eventually things are going to work out. And if you do things with a purpose, you're going to get there. But I just wanted to share that with everybody so you guys understand why I'm dropping more episodes, just because I'm like, you know what, I have the time right now. Let's make it happen. So First Sergeant, thank you so much for coming on with us. I appreciate it. I know that I hit you up. So I looked at my Instagram message when I sent it to you again, and I noticed that I think I hit you up like 7 months ago and I said, "What's up, brother?" And then I never answered back, but you had answered me. So I would definitely want to apologize for that.
it's all good, brother.
But thanks so much for coming on. I know that, as a first sergeant of Marines, you're definitely away from doing what you're always doing, right? And that's leading Marines. So I do appreciate the opportunity to have you on and just talk about your career, talk about the different things that you've gone through. So everybody who's listening, the purpose of this episode today is we're going to talk with First Sergeant just about just travel and adventure. We're going to talk about challenge. We're going to talk about leadership and management. We're going to talk about physical fitness and really just talk about those different benefit tags that he sat down with his recruiter a long time ago. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about his career. I know he looks young as all hell. So I'll be real, man. To look at you First Sergeant and see you as a First Sergeant, I'm like, and to have a mustache, it's even better. So
Yep.
Immediately you're the best First Sergeant in the Marine Corps because you have a mustache. But so without further ado, First Sergeant, welcome.
Hey, brother, I appreciate you inviting me, man. Any short notice or whatever, I'm down to help anybody. One with a podcast, and I understand the consistency aspect of it. I think you're doing a phenomenal job looking at your past guests and allowing them to really tell their story, and you helping narrate that. I think it's pretty amazing. So again, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Whoever's watching and listening, I appreciate you guys paying attention as well. Yeah, I am young, brother. I'm 35. 35. I've been doing this for almost 18 years. I've just got blessed with great genetics. I'll say the Marines absolutely keep me young. Maybe not necessarily young in the joints, but definitely young at heart. So I appreciate it, man.
No, yeah, because I'll be real. Like as soon as I saw your a couple of reels, the first time I ever saw you come across my page like a year ago, like the first one that I saw was the one where you posted and it was you as a Lance Corporal. So like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, this is just a Lance Corporal. And then the next photo was this guy in his Charlie's, in his Alphas as a first sergeant. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. And I did a double take because I was like, bro, there ain't no way. Because you definitely do, like you said, you have those genetics. So before we hop out on the podcast, we were actually talking about your interaction with your recruiter, and we talked about how you actually remember one of your benefit tags being challenge. So how would you say? And well, first of all, how long have you been in the Marine Corps, First Sergeant?
Be 18 years in May.
Oh wow! So in your 18 years, right? Looking back to that day, I don't know how much of it you remember, but that recruiter had to have sat down with you and he pulled out these cool things called benefit tags. And one of the ones that you chose was challenge. And I'm sure that he, I don't, 18 years ago, I'm assuming we had some sort of, Marine Corps enlisted opportunities book that he opened up and showed you how you were going to get challenged. And he probably talked to you about boot camp, and he probably talked to you about
Mhm.
the pool program, and he probably talked to you about how the Marine Corps was going to give you all this challenge. So my first question to open it up is, when that Marine gave you that presentation and he talked to you about the challenge, right? And then you accepted that challenge of becoming a Marine, did you see yourself being here 18 years later?
That's that's gonna be a tough question to answer, but we'll start with the beginning, man. To kind of give context to how it even really occurred was
Yeah.
my mom was a Marine. I was born in
Oh,
Twin on
okay.
Palms. My father, my stepfather was in the army. So typical kid, played sports in high school, very competitive. I love being physically challenged. And once I met the recruiter, and which is even crazier, I actually thought I was going to go into Army Reserves because I wanted to play football in college. But there was something inside, and I think you recruiters probably say the same thing. Is there's like a specific calling that most Marines have, and that's why they join. And something in the back of my head told me that I wasn't making the right decision going to the Army. No offense to all the Army guys out there. Um, and I remember kind of weighing my options before I even talked to a recruiter, talking to my mom, talking to my dad, and kind of really hearing their perspective on their leadership, the things they went through, the family life. Kind of weighing those things. Granted, I was 17 years old when I joined. So meet the recruiter. His name was Staff Sergeant Puller. I'm pretty sure he was a gunny by the time I went to when I shipped off to boot camp. But the main thing with challenge and why it stuck out to me was the competitive nature of why we are who we are as a Marine Corps. And I know, I mean, you could just watch the commercials back then. So this was 2006, and just talking about the lineage of commercials. You see, there's always some sense of challenge in every single commercial, whether that was the guy fighting the dragon, or the I forget what the heck he was called, but all those things resonated with me deep down inside. And I knew if I was going to take the next step into adulthood, I needed to really challenge myself so that I can grow to be a better person. And of course, the recruiter took advantage of that, as he should have, and kind of explained, hey, these are the things that the Marine Corps has to offer for you in regards to challenge. And then, granted, something to think about too was the time period. Most of us senior staff NCOs and staff NCOs in general, that time period was OIF, OEF, Iraq, a little bit parts of early Afghanistan. So I was intrigued to one, be challenged to go to combat, and then I was challenged to really want to better myself. Because at that time, and I was a 17-year-old kid thinking I'm going to get a scholarship. I didn't, because I wasn't applying myself in school. So that is really how I was pushed.
Mm,
Not necessarily by the recruiter, but it was just having that conversation with those tags was important. And I think a lot
right.
of people, that's very underappreciated when they look back on their career. But if you really think about it, that is what they, at least I remember recruit training, like remembering thinking back to those challenges, the tags,
Yeah.
and be like, okay, this makes sense now. And especially having that military background as a military brat and understanding the bigger picture, it helped kind
Hmm.
of really tie things through from recruit training to MCT SOI type deal.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, man, that's my how I deal with the challenge aspect and the way I looked at it.
Got you. So a lot of the reason why you became a Marine was because of the physical challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you saw that through the commercials, you saw that through your parents, and you saw that the Marine Corps had a different type of challenge than the Army was gonna be able to afford you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So how would you say in your 18 years, like, what challenges have you gone through, to make that a reality, right? To make that benefit tag now part of your life and say, "Hey, I actually," because one of the biggest things that we do as recruiters is I always try to explain to people like, "Hey, man, like, the Marine Corps is gonna give you a challenge, but the Marine Corps cannot make you take the challenge. The Marine Corps cannot push you through the challenge. You're the one that has to face these challenges, right? And with you being in the Marine Corps for 18 years now, being a first sergeant of Marines, I can only assume that you've been through your share of challenges, whether mental or physical. So can you kind of share with us some of those challenges that you've actually had to go throughout your years in the Marine Corps, First Sergeant?
Oh, for sure, man. I would say there's probably two or three significant milestones or periods that I know without the challenge itself or with whatever I was going through, if I didn't go through those, I wouldn't be who I am today. And we can start with the first one right off the bat. I get to the fleet. So, again, to provide context, my original MOS in the Marine Corps was combat camera, surprisingly enough. Um, and then before I lap moved to the infantry, my first deployment was to Iraq in 2007. Joined in 2006. I go to MCT. I go to MOS school. I hit the fleet. As soon as I hit the fleet, my unit is our Second Marine Division is already forward at Camp Fallujah. So the only thing I have really to do once I hit the fleet is, learn the ways, right? As a young PFC, get some pre-deployment training done, and then I meet my unit out there for the remainder of deployment. Mind you, for them it was a year long, but for me it ended up being a 9 month. And for somebody to go from within a year from living in your parents' house at 17 years old to now essentially learning young adulthood in Iraq,
Yeah.
uh, with the immersion into the fleet,
Yeah.
and regardless of what people think of MOSs, that mindset of the young NCOs back then and the way they trained their junior Marines is was a little bit more rugged than it is now. And I'm not saying either one is at fault or either one's better, but it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So getting through that and having to understand that I wasn't the guy and I wasn't who I thought I was. And I think that
Mm.
takes some maturity, but it also takes a couple ass chewings. Because I back then I was too confident, dang near cocky.
Hmm.
Uh, and if I wouldn't have gone on that deployment immediately and met some of my NCOs who kind of checked me and let me know, like, hey man, this isn't okay here. Your attitude is not appropriate. Um, I would not have become a corporal almost a year later. So that development and that mentorship that they provided me, along with being able to see the whole Marine Corps during that time. So as a photographer, you get to follow around different elements, of the MAGTAF, right? For me, I was able to follow around the infantry quite a bit. I got to follow around Sergeant Major Marine Corps at the time, Sergeant Major Kent, uh, through Ramadi, Al Assad, and a couple other places in Iraq to really see, big picture, kind of behind the closed doors, uh, and being able to document that via photography was pretty cool. So not only was it a challenge, it was an opportunity, and I think that's what people need to look at it as. Challenge is an opportunity for you to become better,
Mm.
or to really look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I have these things that maybe I'm not becoming better. Maybe I need to pivot and change my attitude, my habits, and seek other things as far as goals are concerned. So that's how I look at challenges, man. It's an opportunity.
Yeah. No, and that's so true, like, because and that's like the biggest thing, right? When you're especially when you're coming to and you're talking about like when you're in that recruiting mindset and you're talking about the different challenges and you're talking about leadership and management, at the end of the day, all of them fall into that bracket of, hey, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to better yourself as a leader. It's a better opportunity for you to better yourself as a man or woman. It's a better opportunity for you to become the best version of yourself. And also, like, if you think about it, like, if you did not take the opportunity to become a Marine, then you wouldn't have most of anything that you have right now in your life, right? And that's one of the biggest reasons why I created the podcast, is because I wanted to give, because someone asked me the other day, like, hey, why did you create the podcast and what is your purpose? And I said, the purpose is literally to give back to the Marine Corps and tell people stories, because there's a lot of people's stories that we don't get out there, right? Not to
Yeah.
say like, because like there's so many people like, right, like Medal of Honor recipients and stuff like that, that we hear their stories all the time, but then there's other people who will get out and we'll never hear their stories, and we'll never hear the challenges they went through. We'll never hear the mental or physical challenges they sought, and the different opportunities they had. And I think that it helps the recruiting effort when other people get on a platform and speak, because now somebody who is in high school or is leaving high school, and maybe they didn't get the scholarships or maybe they didn't get what they thought, and now you're talking about that. Now they can align with you and be like, wow, this dude went from thinking he was going to play scholarships and sports, and now he's an 18-year first sergeant in the Marine Corps. And because a lot of people, they don't ever see themselves doing that, and they don't ever see themselves in the military, right? Like myself, I never thought that I'd be in the Marine Corps. I didn't even know the Marine Corps existed. I thought the Army was the only branch. My brother did 20 years in the Army. My uncle was a Green Beret. My other uncle was in the Army. Like, so my only known thing about the military was it was the Army. So that's why I have you on here, just really to talk about those opportunities, right? So you see that that was like your first challenge, and that's insane, right? Because like now, where it's so crazy how like the Marine Corps is in a constant rotation, because there's this time where we were in OIF, OEF, and there was this constant stuff going on, and you have people like yourself who are getting in the Marine Corps, and then 9 months later, you're finishing MOS school, and now here you are in Fallujah, and you're getting out there, and you quickly have to make this change of who you are, because you don't have time to become more mature. You don't have, like, you've got to do it now, right? So how did that feel as a young, 18-year-old guy, like leaving high school? Now you're, like you said, you're no longer with mom and dad, like you're in Iraq, like all these different things are going on, and now on top of that, like, you're getting that mental and physical challenge at the exact same time, and now you're being led by people you just met, and you're like, so how did that, like, that mental fatigue, like, how did that feel for you? I can't hear you. No, I can't hear anything you're saying. No, I can't hear you. Did your AirPods die? I can't hear anything you're saying. So there is, oh, hold on. No, can't unmute your guest. It says that you're muted. It says that you muted yourself. All right. Hello. Nope. There's a settings that you can click. Maybe see if your AirPods are connected to the settings. All right. Well, everybody who's there, please stand by. We're having a little audio difficulty. Not really sure what happened. No, I can't hear you, man. Can you hear me? That's weird. I don't know. The only thing I can think of is get. I'm gonna remove you from the room. Just come back in. What about now?
I can hear you.
Oh, we're good now.
Dude, I'm so sorry. I have no idea.
No, you're good. No, you're good. That's weird. But we'll just have to
Technology, man.
cut that out. We'll have
No
to
worries.
cut
I
that out.
apologize. I
No, you're
apologize to
good.
the
You're
audience,
good.
man.
No, you're good. So, yeah. So, how did that feel being in Fallujah, being 18 years old, like literally just going from where you were born at, where you were with for 18 years with your family, and now you join the Marine Corps, you become a combat cameraman, and then boom, you get, you go through your pre-deployment, and now here you are. Like, how does that, like, mentally, like that mental challenge?
So initially, and hopefully the younger audience, if they're listening, that can sound very challenging, and it sounds very like, man, oh my god, like it doesn't seem fathomable. You know what I mean? But I will say, in the moment, it takes time. Uh, but I felt accomplished and independent,
Mm,
and I think that's important for the younger generation to understand is whether they're in right now, or they plan on joining, or if they're retired and their career is over, they could probably remember and understand what I'm talking about in independence. You get the EGA in boot camp, you feel accomplished, like you made it. You're transforming into something. You don't really know what that something is until you get to the fleet. And then when you're around people that are challenging you on the daily, you're being forced to be task oriented, and you're being shown how to do things the right way. You feel very independent, and it makes you really understand like why you're there, right? Like, yes, you're independent, you feel that way, but you're also there for a larger purpose, which is
mhm.
obviously the serving, your country, especially when you're forward deployed. And I think that definitely resonated with me because of hearing the things from my family members, my mom and my dad, of like, the things they experienced. It allowed me to understand the bigger picture. But yeah, I would say feeling independent is the most important thing, and I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah,
Independent of like being able to, hey, I can do this. I don't need to be tied to my family. Not completely disregarding them, but like, hey, I'm an adult now. You
yeah,
know, and I'm learning these new things about myself, which I think is very important. Learning about yourself
yeah.
is super important, and when you're challenged, that is really, really how you find out who you really are.
Amen. And that's a huge thing, right? Because and especially like in today's world, right? The like if you look at like the analytics and you look at the numbers, right? People, the average, like there's people. I know a guy. I'm not going to say his name, but I know a guy who's 36 years old and lives at home with his mom and dad still, and literally delivers Chinese food, and that's what he does. And it's like, to me, it's like that's unfathomable. Like that you could allow yourself, or even as a parent, allow that to happen to your child that you created, right? And I bring this up because you're talking about that challenge and and inevitably receiving that independence and becoming a man, and now being able to say, I did this on my own. I went out on my own. I became a Marine. I earned my Eagle Open Anchor. Now I'm in Iraq. Now I'm going through all these things. And you did it alone, but at the same time, you did it amongst other Marines and your leaders and your family, right? But it was time to leave the nest. And I think
Absolutely.
that a lot of people, and one of the things that we deal with a lot now as recruiters, is the idea that like leaving the nest isn't something that has to happen. It's like, oh hey, you can stay here until you're 30. Like you can, it's okay, honey. You don't have to leave yet. And it's like back in the day in 2006 time frame, and even when I joined in 2009, like I was told by my parents when I was 18, like, hey, you graduate high school on June 20th, you're out the door on June 21st. Like that's
Absolutely.
exactly what I was told by
Yeah.
my father. So on June 21st, like the day that I graduated high school, I needed to find somewhere to go. Like I went, my dad literally picked me up from the high school, from my graduation, brought me to the house. My bags were already packed, and I had to be somewhere else, which was my friend Ed's house, right? And I taught, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you're talking about independence and being able to find that on your own, and the feeling of being independent for the first time ever, and knowing, and the biggest thing too, like you said, it's finding yourself. But I think the cool part and like the crazy part about it is that like this isn't happening in like somewhere in America. This is happening in Iraq. And
Yeah.
you're having
Yeah.
these moments of like, dude, I'm really finding out what it is to be a man, and I'm finding out what independence feels like, and like, look at me type thing. And now it's like you're 18. And I think, and I remember like, because I was 20 when I was in Afghanistan, and I remember feeling the same way, like being like, dude, like I was just in high school. I was just hanging out with my fiance, like, and now I'm in Afghanistan, and like all of these different things are happening, and it's like you really quickly have to grow up because you don't have the chance to be immature. You don't have the chance to, to fool around and do one stupid thing. So you quickly have to take up those challenges mentally and physically, and just get through them and endure them. What Going off of that, First Sergeant, like what would you say, like as an NCO, what were some of the challenges that you faced both mentally and physically?
This is going to be a big chapter of my career, what I'm about to explain. So, come back from Iraq. It's 2008. And from being around the infantry guys quite a bit, I was like, hey, I think it's time to lap move, man. So we come back. I go on a fleet week to New York, which is pretty dope. Come back, and it's October 2008. So I drop my lab move package to go infantry. I'm a brand new corporal. I've barely felt the weight of it, right? But now I'm about to take 2 years of experience in one field, and I'm about to completely go complete opposite pivot to the infantry. That right there, man, was the second biggest challenge of my life, I would say, because I knew the weight and the gravity of being a corporal and what that would mean in the infantry compared to what I was previously doing. And when I lat moved, I go to ITB and I get orders 3-7 and 20 on palms, and just having to really humble myself and start from scratch. That was huge. That was a huge challenge, man. And then immediately following my arrival, I get sent to infantry squadrons course, and it's sink or swim. And for the audience, infantry squadrons course is, at the time, you could be a lance corporal all the way to a sergeant and go to that course. And here I am, boot Billmair, corporal, haven't even really been a grunt for very much long. And I get my platoon sergeant's like, hey, man, sink or swim. We're going to send you to this course and we'll see what you're really about, man. Don't know how. I passed. I made it, dude. I passed. But taking on that challenge and understanding the weight and the burden of being an NCO, and then immediately into the work of finding out we're going to Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So going from one end of the spectrum to the other, and then ultimately that deployment was as kinetic as you could possibly believe, and that we went to Sangin in that deployment. And that is really where I would say the cusp of the NCO piece comes into play.
Yeah.
Because I go on deployment as a corporal, I get meritorious sergeant while on deployment, and around that time when I get promoted to sergeant, we go into Musa Kayla and then to Sangin, and obviously it's varsity game time. And that challenge, the reason why I say that's the lab move was the second biggest challenge. The biggest challenge in my career was leading men in combat.
Yeah, and I
As
was
an
gonna
NCO.
ask. That's what I was gonna ask you is because I think, and it's amazing how like you look at the independence, right? Because you went from being a PFC, being in a combat cameraman, to now being led by these NCOs, and you're revering them and you're looking at them and you're learning all these different things quickly. And then you're in in Iraq for 9 months. Then you come back, you become a corporal, you decide, hey, I want to lat move. And then literally as you're doing this lat move and you're doing these courses, now you're immediately going over to OEF to go to go to Afghanistan. And now quickly on the other end of the spectrum. Now you're the person who's an NCO leading Marines into combat. You're the one who's literally, your job is to lead these young Marines and mentor them and guide them and teach them the MOS that you literally just learned. And
Yeah.
like, so how did that feel mentally and physically? Like, because when we speak about it, right, we have to break it down and from the mental capacity to also the physical capacity, because in order for you to be an infantryman, you have to physically be able to do all of these different things. It's cool that you know them, but you have to be able to enact them, right? So how did you feel both mentally and physically?
Mentally, man, you're obviously dealing with lives, right? And I think that is tough. And it's crazy because in the moment you're not necessarily focused on it. Yeah, I mean, you're focused on keeping people alive. But after the fact, when you come back, it's you really take things into perspective and you really soak things in. And I think it's important for us who've been there to remember, like, hey, that was the cusp of what we were prepared to do as Marines. And that is regardless of your MOS, man. Like, you have to be willing to mentally accept the challenge of doing something uncomfortable every single day for however long you're in that environment. And you have to be willing to be on top of your game every single day. You have to be willing to, especially on the NCO side of the house, do the right things every single day. Because the moment you slip, or the moment you show any signs of weakness, per se, other things are going to start cracking. And that is when I really learned that aspect of leadership of, hey, I know we're tired, or I know we've been doing this so long, but if we mess up and we get lazy and we get complacent, bad things are going to happen. And the mental aspect, it eventually does take a toll, but again, you don't really realize it until after the fact because you're just trying to survive the day, man. And then the physical side, dude, I definitely lost some weight. um, but the mental aspect is what carries you through. You can be as physically strong as you want. You can go hard in the pain in the gym. You can be running at the fastest 3 mile, but you really don't know how you're going to be tested until you're in it. And once you're tested, your mental aspect of it is what carries you through.
Mhm.
Um, that would be my best advice to everybody. We focus on the physical fitness aspect, but the mental resiliency piece that I'm not gonna say people blow off, but they don't take it as serious. The
Yeah.
mental resiliency is what's going to drive you, man.
Yeah.
It's what's going to carry you through the tough moments. And for me, it definitely did.
And how would you say you dealt with that, like that mental resiliency? Like, how did you build that up? And I understand that, like, clearly you can't really. It's one of those things that you can't really. It's tough to say you can't teach for it, right? Because you can't really until you're in that moment and the firefights are happening and all these things are happening. The kinetic energy is there. Like, you can't really train for that until besides like tap rap bang, besides your immediate action drills, besides all of those things, all that training, and that's why we do it. But you can't really explain that until it actually is happening, right? So how do you mentally get yourself resilient to that point, and especially in your shoes, right? Because I think that going back into this time, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it had to have been difficult for you because you were a brand new corporal in a brand new MOS, and you're surrounded by, we'll call them what they used to call them, salt dogs, right?
Mhm.
And you see all these senior corporals, these senior sergeants who probably just got back from a pump, and now you're in this position to where like your lance corporals are looking for you for guidance, and you have to be mentally resilient. So how did you deal with that?
To build a resiliency, and this is what I need the NCOs of today to really take to heart, and that is realistic training. That is the one thing that I would say is different on the big generalized spectrum of what I've seen now as a senior staff NCO is the realistic training. Not just like, hey, I'm going to do this task or meet this medal or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm going to put my Marines through some tough, whether it's PT, whether it's challenging them out in the field, really pushing their limits. I think the realistic training that we did, I took it serious. Even though we didn't know what we were getting into at the time, we took every single day serious. And I'm sure it happened with you when you joined in '09 is that generation, like we played for keeps, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we played for keeps at that time. So getting that ingrained for me, one, tracing back to the NCOs when I was a junior Marine in Iraq, them instilling that into me and me understanding the seriousness of it, and then now learning the doctrine side and applying it. that's what allowed me to be as mentally resilient as I could. And then obviously the fact of like, hey, I have good dudes around me that are going to keep me in check, support me mentally, and then I can bounce off that communication and those emotions off of, because there's an emotional aspect too. But yeah, the resiliency piece came from real hard training that's going to allow you to push your body and push your capabilities or what you think you can do.
Now, how do you channel that, right? You brought up the word emotion, because it's got to be really difficult to, in a kinetic environment, be able to maintain your mental resiliency while dealing with the different emotions of the day to day and what's going on, and not speaking to your family, not seeing your family, and in the place in which you were, it was a constant battle, literally, of that physical and mental strength. So how were you able to continue to keep that resiliency when you had to deal with your own emotions and stuff like that?
I had to keep my composure. Uh, you look at we'll look at sports, right? Look at the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, the guys we consider goats. We consider them goats because of the way they handled adversity and the way they handled things when it really mattered. That is, whether it's a game-winning drive, game-winning shot if you're in basketball, or maybe it's the game-winning home run. They're willing to rise to the occasion, but they're keeping their composure throughout. And I took that really serious. I don't know how it got instilled in me, but I always wanted to remain as calm as I could, because I think it's important as a leader through chaos. You have to be willing to be the most calm because you
Yeah.
have people looking at you. So
Mhm.
even though I knew obviously there's a struggle within, and MCDP1 talks about it, right? The emotional human aspect of it. But when you know people are counting on you and you're able to channel everything and not to say positive energy, but in a composed energy to get things done while also being violent at the same time, I think that was important for me. I knew I needed to be calm, keep my emotions in check, be as objective as possible because I knew I had to fight and think of the big picture of what we were doing.
Mm.
And I think, hopefully, if any of my dudes are watching, man, like those dudes, without them, man, I would have never been able to do any of that.
Yeah.
100%. Without those dudes, I would never been able to do any of that.
Mm. So now, being a first sergeant, you would credit them, and you would credit that deployment and all those things to the first sergeant that you are today.
Absolutely, dude. Perspective on life, uh, the human aspect of it, understanding what people may or may not be going through. Absolutely, dude. Absolutely.
Mhm. So so leaving Iraq, leaving Afghanistan, now you said meritorious sergeant. What other challenges now as a sergeant are you facing getting back to the fleet, leaving, at this point you're already in the Marine Corps, you've now had two combat deployments, and now you're coming back to the fleet as a meritorious sergeant. What does that look like for you?
I chose going to SDA, man.
Oh, all right. So I
Uh,
don't know the answer. Hold on. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to go ahead and say that you were a drill instructor.
no, I was a combat instructor because at the time it was an SDA.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I
And
thought we were talking
the
about real SDAs, but my bad.
I
Kidding,
absolutely
kidding.
respect. No, no, I'm. Hey, look, there's different sides. I'm objective, man, but I'm realistic. Uh, the truth is the truth. You know what I mean? But at the time, it was at the time. I went combat instructor because I wanted to take everything that I just went through
Yeah.
and I wanted to apply it in the way that I thought I could. Mind you, I had DI as my second choice. Um, but yeah, I went combat instructor, man, and that was the next challenge because, as you know, the SDA is such a you want to really know how you stack up against your peers. SDA is the thing.
Mhm.
That challenge is a whole different thing. Um, Professional. I would say that's a professional challenge that I faced.
Yeah. So and how did that, so like switching up from being in these two combat deployments to now being in a school setting to where you're the one teaching, because now you're even more independent, because now you're teaching this younger generation of brand new Marines how to now be independent. So you're their first look at the Marine Corps coming out of boot camp. And this is, in a different time. Like, so how did that feel, being the one who's now teaching these brand new enlisted Marines how to do, Marine Corps things?
I think it was really cool, man, and I think I'll use sustaining the transformation, right?
Mm.
I think we lose sight of that. We really don't think about it till we do SDAs, till you're this late in your career. Sustaining transformation and having to understand, okay, recruit training. Well, recruiters got to do their job. They got to canvas. They got to get Marines to basically commit to being a Marine. Uh, they go to recruit training. Now they're like, okay, I'm a Marine. Now what do I do? I earned this title. What do I do with it? They get to MCT or they go ITB. Now I got to show them. For me, it was I got sent to MCT, which was even better. Now I got to say, okay, here's the basic fundamentals of warfighting, of the O3XX tasks, and I got to teach you these things in a 29-day training cycle. But I have to give you a quality product that you're going to remember, hopefully, for however many years. And I think that is shameless plug for combat instructors if they're, for some reason, they don't do drill instructor or recruiting or MSG. That is such an important thing. And what really drove it home was the in Afghanistan when the airfield they try to overrun the airfield.
Yeah.
And those every cooks, administrators, air wing guys and girls, and they defended it and repelled that attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say it's because of their combat instructors, but I would say majority of the reason and the way they fought was
Yeah.
because of whatever they learned in MCT.
Oh no, without a doubt. And it's crazy that you bring that up because one of the Marines that I was on recruiting duty the first time was there that day. And he would, when he was on recruiting duty with me, that would, when it came to challenge and mental challenge and physical challenge, that's what he would talk about. And he would always talk to people because people would ask like, hey, why do I have to shoot on the rifle range? Why does my son have to go through boot camp if he's going to be an accountant or whatever the case may be? And I want, and Staff Sergeant Allen would say, well, because of this exact scenario, when the airfield was attacked, the Air Force, they ran. They didn't do anything. They didn't go get a weapon. They didn't have weapons. Like they didn't do anything. The Marine Corps, they went and their job was not infantry, and they were aircraft Marines or crash fire rescue Marines. And they went and they protected that airfield to the best of their ability with what they were taught, like you said, in MCT. And they were able to take that mental challenge, that physical challenge, that intestinal fortitude, and do everything. And they were able to rise to the occasion because of what they were taught by people like you. And it's awesome that you say that because, like you said, you have 1 month to give these Marines the best and the most articulate information that's going to one day save their lives or somebody else's. And you have 29 days to do that. And in some form, that's going to be the only 29 days they get for quite a while, because then they're going to go to MOS school and then they're going to go into the Fleet Marine Corps. And then so it's very imperative that you do that. So mentally that had to have been tasking on you because and especially from like the conversation that we're having, I can tell very easily that you're the type of person that probably loses sleep overnight because you're like, dude, did I teach enough today? Did Lance Corporal so and so get enough out of what I said? And you were probably like, going crazy trying to ensure that you were the best instructor possible, I could imagine.
Yeah, and then that's a different. I think any SDA or high vis B billet, the schedule, you're not around your family a lot. Your life support, as far as like the normal day-to-day things compared to your average workday, are completely gone. And you're just stuck there with, for a company, it's 440 privates and PFCs, right? That is your lifeline. And I can't sit here and say every single day was my best day. I'd be lying if I said that. But it would take certain things or a little bit of inner motivation to say, hey, okay, I've been through this. It is my job and responsibility to pour that into these guys. And you're not even going to reach 100%, man. If anybody thinks that you're going to reach every recruit, you're going to reach every private that goes to MCT, or if you're teaching M1 school, you can reach every person. I'm doing it for that 10% that listens. You know what I mean? And hopefully these other guys and girls do, but I'm doing it for whoever, when they do listen, I got to give a quality product. Just like recruiters, they got to give a quality representation of the Marine Corps and all the communication skills and everything. Drill instructors, they got to give their quality product. But yeah, I'd be lying if I say every day was gravy, man. But I got through it because I had a strong support system at home, had strong independent thinking, like-minded sergeants and staff NCOs that were there, man. You're just feeding off each other.
Yeah.
And that definitely helps significantly, man.
Yeah. So what so as a in the 18 years of being in the Marine Corps, now currently a first sergeant, out of all of the ranks, what would you say was the most mentally tasking?
It depends. I would say mentally tasking, staff sergeant. Absolutely.
Mm,
Uh, Underrated, underappreciated rank. Um, I think best ranks, sergeant and gunny. But staff sergeant, man, like you're like, I tell my staff NCO sometimes, you're like the stepdad, right? Like you just came in, not everybody likes you 100%, but you're going to get blamed for everything. And you have to take the responsibility of that. And you got to take care of everybody at the same time. It is an underappreciated rank, and you're mentally trying to figure out how to be a staff NCO. You're a sergeant, yesterday, and now you're trying to be think like a gunny and think like, whether you want to be first sergeant or master sergeant. I think it was the most mentally taxing, especially as a platoon sergeant in the infantry, for sure.
mm. So what was it that made you decide to become a first sergeant? Like how did that like what was the decision maker there for you?
Leading Marines in a different way. Uh, you pointed out at the beginning, mustache, young. For those who can't see, I'm damn near sleeved out. I wanted to show Marines that you can be I'm not gonna say who you want to be, right? But you can maintain you throughout, right? You
Yeah.
can maintain your morals and your values, your the way you look, the way you talk necessarily doesn't mean you can't do it. And I had great first sergeants and sergeant majors. Sergeant Major Kraus, Sergeant Major Black was my battalion sergeant major at 3-7. Sergeant Major Castle was my SOI sergeant major. Like these guys are like legends now.
Yeah.
So they said great examples. There's some times where I want to be a master sergeant, master guns, but I wanted to lead all Marines. There's nothing wrong with master sergeants, but they're affecting more MOS and a technical aspect. I wanted to be able to put in any climbing place, any environment, and be able to apply everything that I know uh, to any Marine. And that's why I did it, man.
Hmm. So you just wanted to be able to go anywhere and be more versatile and be able to not and also from what it sounds like you also like lap moving.
Apparently, dude, because that's exactly what it feels like, man. Yeah, I mean, mass sergeants, and don't get me wrong, mass sergeants can do the same things, but they're
Yeah.
mostly impacting the MOS.
Yeah.
For me, like I want to be able to take my mindset and show, because of my history and the lab moving and knowing what any Marine should be wanting to do, I want to be able to apply that everywhere I go.
Mhm.
I like advising commanders. I like teaching, developing Marines. And to be honest, man, I just like being around Marines. And as first sergeant, I can circulate the battlefield anytime I want. I can reach down and go talk to the lance corporal who's having a bad day. And that aspect of leadership, I think, is amazing, especially being a first sergeant, man.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So lastly, what would you say going into your, being at 18 years, like looking over your career, what would you say is your most profound challenge that you've had to overcome in your entire career? Like the thing that made you who you are as a man, as a husband, as a father. And when I ask this question, right, I'm not just speaking Marine Corps. I'm
Yeah.
speaking fatherhood, as a husband, as a spouse. Like, what would you say in your 18 years of being independent is the most mentally challenging thing that you've overcome?
Returning from combat. I think
Mm,
that isn't talked about enough. Because obviously there's the mental aspect of it. For that Afghanistan deployment, I had just gotten married a few months before. Married into being a father. When I met my wife, my son was 2. Um, so coming back from everything that I went through and now transitioning into being around as a husband and being around as a father, and then going straight.
No. I think he got a phone call. No.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sorry, man. Work. I apologize, dude.
No,
I told you what was going on. I
yeah,
told you
you're
what was going
completely
on.
fine.
I even put it on do not disturb. That's crazy. But yeah, going through that emotional roller coaster, learning how to be a dad, learning how to be a good husband was the most profound mental thing that challenge that I had to go through, man. And people don't really think about that too often, but at the same time, it's a blessing,
Yeah.
um, for sure.
Yeah. And capping it up, one of the best things that I ever heard was a friend of mine, Brandon Mancini. He's out of the Marine Corps now. He just did like I think 4 or 5 years, and he was an infantry Marine. And he one of the things that he told me is he said, "I'll never regret being in the Marine Corps because being a corporal, being an NCO taught me how to be a dad." He said like he's like, dude, that was the best experience, the best training that I ever could have had in leadership and management and becoming a father and being a husband, was becoming an
Absolutely.
NCO because you learn that servant leadership and you learn how to take care of people before yourself, and that's all the things that being a father and being a husband calls you to do. So I definitely thank you for your time, First Sergeant. I know you've got First Sergeant things to do. So
I'm sorry, man. I'm
no,
so
no, no,
sorry,
no,
brother.
no, not at all, not at all. I definitely understand that. But and that like leaves us at a good place to stop. I really appreciate your time, especially getting into that coming home part of it, right? Because there are some people, especially when you do 2 pumps pretty much back to back, it's not an easy thing to come home. And then, okay, well, you made it home, but are you really home mentally, right? So for you
Absolutely.
and especially for you to come home, become a father, become a husband, all of those things, those emotions are coming through your mind as you're still coming home and you're still figuring that out. That's definitely got to be a huge mental challenge to overcome. But I'm so glad to have you on, First Sergeant. Thank you so much again for your 18 years of dedicated service to the Marine Corps. And I'm sure you're probably staying a little bit longer, at least 2 more years. But I
Absolutely.
look forward to you becoming a sergeant major one day, and hopefully one day meeting you in the flesh. But do you have any last words for us, First Sergeant?
I would say, one, I appreciate you, man, for offering me here and having the patience to go through the technical difficulties.
No, we're
And
good.
then for the audience, man, I appreciate you guys watching and supporting. I would say, it sounds cliche, but anything you can do, anything you put your mind to is a legitimate. It's legit, um, and that is what the Marine Corps teaches you. And I tell my Marines this at least annually. It's like, hey, like we all felt the same way when we graduated recruit training. I don't know a single person that graduated and was like, man, this was not it, dude. Everybody dang near cried, wanted to cry. They felt a sense of pride and belonging. Huh? Uh, felt a sense of pride and belonging. They felt like something bigger than themselves. And I tell them that to remind them, like, hey, just because you had a bad first duty station, or maybe you had a bad time on SDA, or maybe you had a bad deployment, in the bigger scheme of things, in the bigger picture, there's so much you've learned. And unfortunately, they may have had one thing affect them, but they can always reach back to that pride and belonging they felt on day one, man. And I think that's very important to remind ourselves as leaders, and as junior Marines. Is just remind yourself of
Amen.
why you did it, and that's going to drive you every single day you put your uniform on. Just remember why you're here.
So before we end this, I just saw that we had a comment from Gunnery Sergeant Cabrera, and it says mentoring his safety officer is probably the hardest challenge he's ever had to overcome.
My safety officer is amazing. Lieutenant D Francisco, he's a great dude, man. He brings such a positive energy. Like that dude is infectious. Like you talk about infectious smiles, infectious personalities. My safety officer is absolutely that guy.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Gunny Cabrera for the comment. But thanks again, First Sergeant. I hope you have a good rest of the night, and I'll let you get back to, doing your First Sergeant duties.
Awesome,
Have
brother.
a
I
good night.
appreciate you once again.
Yes,
You too,
thanks a
man.
lot. Have a good night.